Good evening. Welcome to Adventures with Rusty. For those who may not be familiar with Ichy Boots, she travels alone around the world on a motorcycle. And she could probably choose just about any motorcycle she wanted. But the one she chose, she went back to a Yamaha Tenere from 1987.
So let's talk a little bit about my next motorcycle.
And she tells us the reasons that she chose this motorcycle. She wanted something that was lightweight, reliable, and simple. And I've had similar thoughts. A lot of the motorcycles we have today, they're very nice motorcycles, and they work really well for some things. But if you're going on an adventure ride or going out in the desert, miles from civilization, there's certain things that become more important. And that is simplicity, reliability, and like Ichy Boots said, you need to have a light machine that you can pick up. The other thing is you need to be able to troubleshoot it if something goes wrong. Would you like to troubleshoot this or this? Now, a lot of the bikes are pretty good about reliability, but I'm not sure they're any more reliable than some of the bikes like from the 80s and 90s that were air-cooled. There were no radiators. I know for me, I really don't care about another ignition map or a big display. I want something that's really simple. Anyhow, let's see what Ichy Boots, let's see what she has to say.
To include you a little bit in the thought process of why I picked this motorcycle. So there's a couple of things that I find very important for the type of riding and the type of traveling that I do. And the main thing is the weight of the bike, right? It needs to be light enough so I can pick it up out of the mud, out of ditches, and that several times a day if necessary. Then the second thing that's very important to me is the service interval. So if you start looking at lighter motorcycles, like more enduro types, often they have very short maintenance intervals. So they need oil changes every 1,000 kilometers, or even they're counting in hours, which just doesn't work for me. And another thing that is important to me is that the bike is simple, that it doesn't have too many crazy electronics, because in my experience, all that stuff can just break.
So let's pretend that we're Ichy Boots, or that we're a friend trying to help her. And let's see if we can find the very best adventure bike that is lightweight, simple, and that works well, and it has long service intervals. Let's start with the Yamaha Tenere, since that's what she has chosen. I had a close cousin of the Yamaha Tenere. I had a 1985 Yamaha XT600. It was a very good motorcycle and a very good dual sport bike. I use it as a dual sport and as an off-road motorcycle. One of the things I liked about the 1985 Yamaha XT600 is at that time it had two carburetors. And so it had a small carburetor and then a secondary carburetor that would open up when the throttle was opened. And I think in part because of that, it got really good gas mileage. It may have been running a little bit lean on the smaller carburetor, but I was getting over 50 miles a gallon. I think about 52 or 53 miles per gallon. And so on a tank of fuel, although I think it held like 3.2 gallons, I think I was able to get about over 150 miles on a tank. But this Yamaha Tenere, I don't think it has the dual setups. So I would almost suggest maybe she would want to consider the 1985 if they had a Yamaha Tenere. They had a Yamaha XT600, which could probably be adapted to, take some components off the Yamaha Tenere from 1987. And I suspect it would work. So that would be one of my suggestions if she was to go with this. But the Yamaha Tenere, the one she's looking at, I believe the claimed weight dry is 341.7 pounds. So if we assume that we're going to have a tank that holds 4 gallons of fuel, that would be another 24 pounds. So that's like 300 and 66 pounds plus oil, so maybe 370. So it's starting to get a little bit heavy. I think the suspension is going to be a little bit dated and it's going to be a little bit heavy. So let's look at some of the other options and see if we can find a better bike for us or for Ichy Boots, and then let's discuss the motorcycles that we're going to consider are the 1987 Yamaha Tenere XT600, the 2025 Honda XR650L, and the 2025 Suzuki DR650S, and the 1994-95 ATK 605. Now these bikes are all similar. They have their origins in a similar era, and they're all oil cooled. So they all have simplicity, and they do have different service intervals. If I had any of these bikes, I would probably use the same service interval on all of them. Let's do a quick review of the Yamaha XT600 Tenere. On the plus side, it has a 6.3 gallon gas tank. Now that's best in class for the bikes that we're talking about. And that can be a big deal if you don't like walking to your destination. It has a simple, reliable motor. It makes good power. I remember the exhaust being relatively quiet, but it still seemed to make good power. The rear wheel has a dampener in it, which may help the gearbox last a little longer, and it may help the tires last a little bit better. It's a bit dated, but I think it's still a good looking bike, especially the Tenere. I thought it was a good looking bike years ago. On the minus side, the suspension I think is probably a bit dated. I think the suspension has probably come quite a ways since the time this bike was made. It has a rear drum brake. A disc brake would be better, and it's a bit on the heavy side. My XT600 on the trails, tight slow trails, it did tend to get hot. I'm not sure how much jetting had to do with it, but that was a little bit of an issue with my XT600. But now it's going to have a different carburetor, so that may not be an issue on the Tenere. Now let's move over to the Honda XR650L. My impression is that it's a good, reliable motorcycle. And on the plus side, it's a Honda, which means it's probably been well tested and refined. And there's probably a lot of them out there, so you're going to be able to get parts. In fact, it's still around. You can still buy it new. So I don't think parts are going to be an issue. So it's a simple, proven motor. Its brother is the XR600, which is a well-known race winner. It has front and rear disc brakes, and after the initial braking period, it has a 2,000-mile service interval, which is good. The bike, it's old enough to be cool, and anyway, it can still be bought in 2025. On the minus side, it's a bit heavy. It only has a 2.8 gallon gas tank, which isn't really big enough if you're going long distances. The tank, the air shrouds, and the exhaust, they don't help the looks. I don't like the tank and the air shrouds at all. The suspension on it looks like it's from 1993, which is the first year that it was introduced. Let's move on to the DR650. Now I haven't owned this one, so guys who are watching this, you can help me out in the comments. Tell me why you like this bike. The good part is you can still buy the DR650S. I believe that's the street model in 2025. It has disc brakes. It's a decent looking bike. It looks more modern than the XR650L. It's my impression, from my limited exposure from the things I've seen or read about it, that it makes a decent lightweight adventure bike. On the minus side, I'm going to say it's a bit heavy, and it only has a 3.4 gallon gas tank, which really isn't big enough. Last of all, let's talk about the ATK 605 ESDS. The ES stood for electric start, and the DS stood for dual sport. Now this wasn't an official dual sport motorcycle. It came with enough wiring and lighting that with a little work, you might be able to get it registered in your home state and make it street legal. The country of origin was USA. They were put together in Centerville, Utah, and they used a Rotax engine from Austria as a 598cc motor. The good thing is that motor is known for reliability, and it's used by a number of the dirt track racers. This motorcycle, it tended to use more lightweight, expensive parts than the other motorcycles in this comparison. And on the plus side, it was approximately 40 pounds lighter than the next comparable bike. And that's a lot of weight to make up. So this motorcycle is far more capable off-road. This motorcycle was capable of being raced, and it could also be used as a dual sport motorcycle. The gas tank held 4.2 gallons, which is pretty good. Now, probably not all of that is usable, but that's still a pretty good gas tank size. And the good thing is it still felt slim. I really don't notice the size of the tank on this motorcycle. Another plus about this bike was it came with electric start and kickstart. That's really nice to have. It has disc brakes, Talon hubs, Pro Taper handlebars. The suspension was from WP, both front and back, and they were both adjustable for compression and rebound. And one of the things that was really nice was the rear shock can be adjusted without any tools. If you want to change the rebound or compression, you can just do it with your hand. Now, as far as a dual sport motorcycle, it may not be as good of a bike for highway use. I think the others may be more refined in that aspect. It has no keyed ignition. The WP suspension may be a little stiffer than the others in this comparison. When it was new, it tended to have some stiction. After it gets broke in, I'm not sure how it's going to compare. The rear fender was quite minimal, and so if you're going to use it for highway use or even off-road use, it might be a good idea to stiffen that up. My experience was that if it was being used in a rough way, like off-road, it could break a conventional tail light, and so it would probably be good to put an LED one in there. And it would probably be good to add something to stiffens. I think KTM, it uses a rear KTM fender, and I think KTM had a stiffener that would stiffen that rear fender. The other thing is the tail light is very small. It may be a good thing to consider replacing that with something that's a little larger and more visible. If you're more slanted towards the off-road capabilities, it's hard to beat this ATK 605. And that's probably why I've chosen it. Now, the particular one I have, I will also drive it across the country. I wouldn't want to do that on the freeway. It will do those higher speeds, but it's a far funner bike to ride, like on the highway or dirt roads. And it's capable of doing even a little more technical single track, but it's a little bit big and a little bit heavy for tight, heavy single track. If I was going to use it for that a lot, I'd probably let some of the preload out of the suspension and gear it down quite a bit. And then I think it would be capable of doing tighter single track. Anyway, these are the 4 bikes I wanted to review. I think you can tell my choice would be the ATK 605. But tell me what you like about these other bikes. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more rides, reviews, and adventures.